That is in the book, and it is something that Lebay's brother says to Dennis. And so I love how the movie took that line from the book, but they just kind of restructured it into this scene right here, and it's just so perfect. Hello, and thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about everybody's favorite killer car, Christine, by Stephen King, published in 1983. And I'm comparing it with the movie directed by John Carpenter, also released in 1983. So Stephen King, his popularity was so high at this point that they began filming this movie before the book was even released. And the reason I'm covering Christine is because it was a runner-up in a book versus movie poll that I had that was Stephen King themed, and Carrie ended up winning that poll, but Carrie was basically a shoo-in. Like, if Carrie didn't win, I would have been shocked. And someone kind of pointed out how unfair the poll was, and I was like, yeah, you're right, it was unfair. So to make up for that, I decided to also cover whichever came in second, which just so happened to be Christine. And I'm just going to get right into the details of the plot, which means there will be spoilers going forward. So in both book and movie, we see the strong friendship between popular jock Dennis and his quote-unquote loser friend Arnie. And if it wasn't for Dennis, Arnie would have been beaten up and picked on way more than he already is. But one day while driving home, they see an old rundown 58 Plymouth Fury for sale, and Arnie, he experiences love at first sight. Like, literally everyone else who sees this car thinks it is a piece of junk, but Arnie will just not hear it, and he buys the car and says he is going to restore it. And so he is keeping Christine at a garage while he is working on it, but even once the car is finished, his parents don't want him parking it in the driveway. And their dislike for the car is due in part because his mom is a very controlling person, and so she doesn't like that Arnie bought the car without talking to them first. And again, Arnie, he's getting older, he's a senior in high school, and so she's losing her grasp on her child, right, who is becoming an adult and making his own decisions. So on one hand, she wants to still try to control him in a sense, and so she's uncomfortable with the fact that he's growing up and making his own choices. But also, most people, including Dennis, have an inherent dislike for this car, which is called Christine, and they don't know why, they just don't like it. But yeah, the car, Christine, it was very run down. However, Arnie fixes her up surprisingly quickly, and as Christine improves, so does Arnie, because in the book specifically, we hear how Arnie had horrible acne, and yet, once he gets Christine, eventually his acne is totally all cleared up. But in both, he also grows in confidence as well, and he gets the guts to ask out the prettiest girl in school, a new student named Leigh, and she says yes. But to go along with his growing confidence, he also gets overconfident, and to the point where he can be very aggressive, and he just becomes meaner as his time with Christine goes on. And then early on in the story, Dennis, he gets a football injury, and he spends the middle chunk of this story in the hospital recovering. And so at the start, he is the one narrating the book, and so he's a huge focus. But then for the middle chunk, we just hear about him here and there. And then he comes back in the end when he is out of the hospital. But one significant change from book to movie is that in the book, the original owner of Christine is the one who sells Arnie the car. So his name was Roland Lebay, and he was just this bitter, hateful old man. And soon after Lebay sells Christine, he ends up dying. And then Dennis and Arnie decide to go to the funeral. And here they meet Lebay's brother. And the brother is a nice enough guy. And he tells Arnie, like, you would be better off just selling Christine and being rid of her. And he says, again, how his brother was just an angry, hateful person. And he says how the only thing Lebay cared about in life was Christine. And then Dennis later goes to talk privately with this brother, and the brother tells him that Lebay, he had a child who choked and died while they were driving Christine, and then also Lebay's wife committed suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning in Christine. And then over time, near the end of the book, Dennis calls up Lebay's brother yet again to talk to him a bit more, and in this phone call, we find out even more about how, like, Lebay, he potentially might have murdered a family when he was only 12 years old by setting their house on fire. But then also when his daughter was choking, so they had gotten out of the car, and Lebay was like slapping her on the back, like trying to stop her from choking. But once he kind of gave up trying to help her before he died, he made sure that her body was in the car so that she would die while she was in Christine. And so Lebay's brother theorizes that this was some sort of sacrifice to some dark entity, which is what gave Christine her power. And yeah, something again unique to the book is that while Arnie has Christine, he eventually becomes possessed by Lebay. And so Lebay either possesses Arnie or possesses Christine, and that is how she's able to drive on her own. And yeah, Arnie, he starts to talk like Lebay and even look like Lebay, and he writes like Lebay, which in the book there's this whole part where Dennis, he sees Arnie's 2 signatures at 2 different times, and he's like, the signature has totally changed. Like his handwriting has changed because he's becoming Lebay. And they're going on about how totally different these signatures looked, but I kind of thought they looked pretty similar. I should have taken a picture of it, but I got this book from the library and I already returned it. But yeah, I felt like the signatures didn't look different enough, but that's just my opinion. But yeah, in the movie, Lebay has already died, and it is the brother who was there selling Christine. And like I said, in the book, the brother was like a nice enough guy, and he was, pretty clean cut and stuff. Whereas here, Lebay's brother seems to be like as much of a piece of work as Lebay had been. And also this guy seems to be wearing some sort of back brace, which again, in the book, Lebay is the one who is wearing a back brace, and we eventually find out why. But yeah, so I thought it was an interesting change for the movie to have it be the brother selling the car. But I loved this actor. I thought all of his scenes were fantastic. But yeah, so the brother sells the car to Arnie in the movie, and then Dennis is talking to the brother, and the brother tells him that Lebay committed suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning and that he died in Christine. And then also it's the same story with the daughter choking and then the wife also committing suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. And also the movie starts out with us seeing Christine on the assembly line when she's being made in the 50s. And we see a guy get inside and he drops his cigar ash on her seat, and then she causes him to die. And so in the movie, right from the moment she was made, she was evil, right? Whereas in the book, it seems like Lebay, again, his hateful, vengeful personality and how he only cared about Christine and then the death of his wife and daughter, it fed Christine and gave her power. And then once he dies, like his ghost is possessing Christine and Arnie. And so yeah, how Christine has her power is very different because in the movie, theoretically, maybe Lebay was kind of similar to Arnie when he first got the car, right? But then the car messed him up the way it messes Arnie up. But in both book and movie, there is a bully named Buddy at their local high school who likes to pick on Arnie. And in the movie, this guy looked like he was about 40 years old. And we do hear in the book that Buddy was held back a time or two. But I mean, this guy looks like he's been held back like 20 times. Like no matter how you cut it, this actor was way too old to be playing a high schooler. So it was kind of funny. So I actually just looked up his age online, and apparently the actor was only 24 in this movie. I was way off saying that he looked well into his 30s. So maybe the guy smoked a lot of cigarettes or something because he looked older than 24, that's for sure. But I don't know, maybe I'm being too harsh on him. But I thought I would clarify. In real life, he wasn't as old as I thought he had been. But anyway, like I said, Buddy and his buddies like to pick on Arnie, and so they decide they want to trash Christine. And so they go, in the movie, they go to the garage where he keeps Christine, whereas in the book, he was keeping Christine at an airport parking lot. But regardless, either way, Buddy and his friends go and they totally trash Christine and they just destroy her. By the way, in the movie, when they're getting ready to destroy Christine, the way they're positioned was reminding me a lot of Grease Lightning. And I feel like that was probably intentional. And in the book, Stephen King, he mentions Grease and John Travolta in the book Christine, which is funny because John Travolta, like one of his first roles was in Carrie. But yeah, so they destroy Christine. However, Arnie has the car looking as good as new in no time. Like it's shocking how fast he fixes her. And then eventually all of the guys involved in trashing Christine, they end up dying. And the reader knows that Christine killed them because she starts driving on her own in both book and movie, and she kills the people who had trashed her. Except in the book, we find out that one guy left town, and so he doesn't die, but the others do. And so an investigator comes to town named Junkins, and he is investigating these murders, and he can tell, like, Arnie is involved in some way, but he can't find any hard evidence, and there's like nothing to pin it on Arnie. He just knows that Arnie is involved. And in both, the garage he keeps Christine at is owned by Will Darnell, and he kind of seems like a slimy guy in both book and movie, but we learn even more about him in the book and how he has his hands in all sorts of illegal doings, and he even has Arnie start working for him, where Arnie will drive his different contraband items around and across state lines to deliver them. But this aspect of the story is not in the movie. But there's a whole side plot about this though in the book, because Junkins, again, he knows Arnie is involved in the murders, and yet he can't figure out how. And so they know about Will Darnell and his illegal stuff. And so Junkins has Arnie, he is driving across state lines delivering some illegal cigarettes. And so they have Arnie and Will Darnell arrested, and Junkins is the one behind this, but his goal is that they will arrest him for this other charge, but also be able to learn about how he is connected to the murders. However, Arnie, he doesn't confess anything in any way whatsoever, and he is eventually released. And then soon after, Christine shows up at Will Darnell's house, and she smashes into his house and runs him down and kills him. And so because Will Darnell is dead, they're not going to press charges just against Arnie. And so the whole thing is dropped, and all is well as far as Arnie is concerned. Whereas in the book, Will Darnell, again, he is killed, but it is because he sees Christine coming in after she has killed someone. So she is driving herself, and he goes in there and he sees she's empty, and then he sits down inside of her, and then she kills him. And so this, I guess she killed him just because he saw she had no driver, or just because he sat inside of her and she didn't like it. It's not quite as clear, whereas in the book, it was very understandable why she killed Will Darnell. But in the book, we also hear that Will Darnell, he does at one point see Christine driving by herself. And so he's very spooked by this in the book, but he doesn't do anything. He just sits and he thinks like, okay, how can I use this information to benefit me? Which I thought was just so fitting for his character, right? Because initially there's part of you that's like, oh, is he going to do something good with this information? Like, is it going to change him? Is he going to help someone or, something? But all he does is be like, like, how can I use this to my advantage? But yeah, in both book and movie, Christine, she gets revenge on those who wrong her in some way. But in the book, she also killed people who had it out for Arnie in some way or other. And it almost reminded me of that movie Monkey Shines, where the guy, he almost like shares thoughts with the monkey. And so when he is angry at someone, the monkey can sense it, and the monkey will kill people that he's angry at. And that movie, it is based on a book. I have not read the book. I've just seen the movie. But yeah, this aspect of the book was kind of reminding me of Monkey Shines. But anyway, in the book, so Arnie, he can sense when he needs to go out of town. And when he goes out of town is when Christine drives on her own and will kill someone. And the reason he needs to be out of town is twofold, because one, it gives him an alibi because he's going to be the number one suspect. But then two, Lebay cannot possess Christine and Arnie at the same time. And so he needs to be out of town just doing his own thing while Lebay is possessing Christine, causing her to kill someone. And in the movie, Christine can fix herself just on her own. And we have that scene where she begins to fix herself while being parked, and Arnie is like, okay, show me. And then she totally restores herself in front of him. And the effects were so impressive in the film right here. This was a really cool scene. Whereas in the book, we do see there's like a time or two where she does fix herself while she is standing still. But for the most part, what causes her to be restored is when she is moving, her odometer runs backwards. And so it seems like as the odometer goes backward, she herself, like her condition is going backward. And so for example, after Buddy and his friends trashed the car, Arnie had to physically push her in back of Darnell's lot and get her odometer to be moving backward. And then as he pushed her, eventually her engine was repaired and then her tires inflated. And then he was able to get in and drive her, and he drove her the rest of the time until she was fixed. And so yeah, for the most part, it seems it works best when she is moving. And there are multiple times too where he will be out driving somewhere, but then he just loses hours and he's like, was I just driving that whole time? Like, I don't even know. But he just goes and drives her for hours. And the more she's driven, the more power she is gaining and the better condition she is getting in, right? And it also seems like she is zapping power from Arnie, because while she grows stronger, he seems to be growing weaker. But also, as we know from other possession stories, generally when someone is possessed, the Arnie part of him is growing weaker as the Lebay part is like feeding on who Arnie is, But yeah, after Arnie fixes Christine after Buddy trashes her. We don't know how he did it. We just know that she was repaired super quickly in some supernatural way. And Arnie starts to wear a back brace, and it's because he threw his back out pushing Christine. And so he's wearing the same kind of back brace that Lebay had been wearing when they bought the car. And yeah, so for a good chunk of this book, he has an excuse as to how he hurt his back. But in the back of his mind, he's like, you know, that's a lie. Like, you know how you really hurt your back. But he consciously won't admit how he hurt his back. And he doesn't want to admit what happened because it's just so crazy and unexplainable, I guess, that he doesn't want to acknowledge that he pushed Christine until she fixed herself. But we need to talk about Leigh a bit. So in both book and movie, Arnie's relationship with Leigh becomes strained due to his attachment with Christine. And Leigh also just has an inherent dislike for Christine. And in the book, she draws the line when she almost chokes to death while in the car. And this happens. So the car has already been trashed and then restored. And so they've been dating for a little while now. And they're out driving and they pick up a hitchhiker. And then as soon as they drop the hitchhiker off, Leigh ends up choking. And Arnie is sitting there right beside her, but he's just slapping her back, which is doing nothing. And so the hitchhiker is able to open the door and he pulls her out and he does the Heimlich maneuver on her. But then Arnie gets upset that this hitchhiker is touching Leigh. So then he gets out of the car and he punches the hitchhiker after he's done, saving Leigh. And so she's just like, what are you doing? He just saved my life. Like, why are you punching him right now? And so after this, Leigh, she feels like the car, Christine wanted her to die. And she was like seeing it as an entity, basically. And so after this night, she tells him like, it's either me or Christine. Like, I am not going out with you until you get rid of that car. Like, it's over until then. Whereas in the movie, the choking incident happens earlier in their relationship while they're at a drive-in. And Arnie, he is locked out of the car. And so he can't help Leigh. However, someone in the car next to them is able to get out and they save her life. And here, Arnie does not punch the guy like he did in the book. But after this, Leigh is iffy about Arnie, but it didn't lead to the blowout that the choking incident had in the book. So it wasn't like she didn't put up a firm stance, like it's over now. And in fact, the next time they see each other, this is when Arnie then sees that Christine has been trashed. And then he just becomes so obsessed with Christine at this point that his relationship with Leigh kind of gets put on the back burner. And then, yeah, over time in both, it's just kind of officially over between the two of them because he prioritizes Christine. But in the book, it was so creepy too, because even after Leigh tells him like it's over unless you get rid of the car, Arnie is then talking to Dennis, and Dennis knows what happened because Leigh told him. So he knows there is no chance of them getting together. And yet Arnie is like, oh, she'll get over it. Like, she'll come around, she'll be fine with Christine. And then me and Leigh, we're going to get married and then we're going to move away. But the way he says it, like, he doesn't care what Leigh wants. Like, he's so delusional. And this is Lebay taking over as well. So he's just like, he doesn't care what Leigh wants. This is what he wants. And so he therefore has this confidence that it is going to happen because basically it's implying that he doesn't need Leigh's permission in a sense, right? He's just kind of like, this is just how it's going to be, whether she likes it or not, basically. And so, yeah, when I was like putting myself in Leigh's shoes, like it was very concerning the way he was talking. But then Dennis and Leigh, they end up becoming romantically involved when they get together to talk about their worries over Christine and Arnie. And Arnie catches them one night when they're in Dennis's car, and so this causes him to be furious with them. However, this kind of works in their favor because then Dennis, in the book specifically, he's able to like get Arnie all worked up and angry as a way to lure Christine to the garage at night where they can then try to kill Christine. And in the end of the movie, Christine shows up with Arnie driving and he dies in the process, but they are able to smash Christine. And later she is turned into one of those like giant cube things. However, the movie ends with us potentially seeing some slight movement, implying that Christine might still be able to repair herself. Whereas in the book, when Christine shows up at the garage, Arnie's dead father is in the driver's seat. And it is because Christine, before going to the garage, she first went to Arnie's home, and Arnie and his mom, they were out of town. So it was just the dad. And Christine was somehow able to get the dad to get into the car, and then he committed suicide. And so Christine drives over with his dead body still in the car. And that was so sad because we got to know the parents pretty well through the course of the story. And so yeah, seeing that the father had died was pretty sad. Oh, and by the way, in the end of the movie, Junkins, the investigator, he is still alive and he is there with Dennis and Leigh at the end. Whereas in the book, Christine kills Junkins as well. So yeah, she kills a lot of people in the book. But anyway, so In the book, Dennis is driving this like giant dumpster truck thing named Petunia. And so there is a showdown between Petunia and Christine. And ultimately, they do succeed and they are able to smash Christine. And then Dennis, he wakes up in the hospital because he was injured in the process. And he tells this other investigator who knew Junkins, he tells him the whole story. And this guy is the one who has Christine taken and smashed into a cube. But Dennis, he is writing this 4 years after the events have taken place. And he and Leigh, over time, they drifted apart and they did not stay together. And he says how this shared experience between the two of them with what happened with Christine, like it was too much. And when they were around each other, they were reminded of it. And so, yeah, the shared experience hurt them rather than helped them. But the reason Dennis says he is now writing everything down is because, remember, I said earlier that in the book, one of the guys who trashed Christine, he had left town, and so he survived. Well, 4 years later, Dennis sees in the paper that this guy was working at a drive-in when he was killed because a car barreled through the building he was in and ran him down, which sounds an awful lot like Christine. And so Dennis, and then also he wrote to the investigator who had Christine turned into a cube, and the guy never replied to him. And so Dennis fears that Christine is back and she is out for revenge, and she eventually is going to try to find Leigh and Dennis. And I thought this was a great ending. I loved it. Oh, and Arnie died, by the way. I forgot to say that. So he and his mom, right, they had been out of town and they were driving. And it seems like once Lebay, when Christine was being smashed and Lebay kind of gave up, he then went to try to possess Arnie again. And it's hard to say whether he succeeded or not, but ultimately this led Arnie to crashing the car and he and his mom died. And in both book and movie, but probably even more so the book, we see how Christine's effect on Arnie is a lot like substance addiction. And this line right here is very fitting for this. Oh, he loved her and loathed her. He hated her and cherished her. He needed her and needed to run from her. She was his and he was hers. And then also whenever he is near Christine, and especially when he is touching her, like all of his worries and fears and anxieties just disappear, and he is filled with this confidence where he's just like, oh, like everything's gonna be okay. These people can't hurt me. Just like how alcohol takes away all of those worries, right? And fills you with this false sense of confidence and you just forget all of your worries. And then also addiction causes people to be very edgy and angry, and Arnie is definitely very edgy and angry. And in the book, when he is caught smuggling those cigarettes, when he sees the cops, he is filled with fear, but we read, he could see his own eyes in the rear view, wall-eyed with fear behind his glasses. Not for him, though. Not for him. Christine. He was afraid for Christine. What they might do to Christine. And so yeah, addicts who care so much about the substance they are hooked on, and they care about that more than their own well-being. And then also in the book, his parents, as well as other characters, they think that Arnie is addicted to some type of drug or something, and that is why he is acting and looking the way he is, because that's like the only thing that makes sense. And I personally love when King writes about addiction, either directly or indirectly, and so I loved this aspect of the book. But then there is, of course, also the love, lust, obsession theme going on here, because Christine, of course, is talked about as a she. And there's a great part in the movie when Dennis and Arnie are talking about Leigh and Christine, and Arnie goes on to talk about what love does to a person. And he says, let me tell you a little something about love, Dennis. It has a voracious appetite. It eats everything. Friendship, family. It kills me how much it eats. But I'll tell you something else. You feed it right, and it can be a beautiful thing. And that's what we have. You know, when someone believes in you, man, you can do anything in the entire universe. And when you believe right back in that someone, then watch out, world, because nobody can stop you then. Nobody ever. And so Dennis, he's like, oh, like that's how you feel about Leigh. And then Arnie, he's like, what? No, I'm talking about Christine. And so this part was just so darkly funny. And also the line about how love is a voracious eater and it eats friendships, that is in the book, and it is something that Lebay's brother says to Dennis. And so I love how the movie took that line from the book, but they just kind of restructured it into this scene right here, and it's just so perfect. And the movie also has the scene at the start when Dennis is saying that they need to get Arnie to lose his virginity this year. And then Christine comes along and Arnie becomes involved with her in an intimate way, as we see from that quote I just shared. And, you know, he loves her and he values her above anyone else. And so it's funny because Arnie obviously doesn't lose his virginity in the normal sense, but he kind of does lose it in a more abstract way, I guess you could say. But also in the book, there's this whole section where, not this whole section, it's like a paragraph, where King is talking about how men in general refer to cars as a she. And that's always the case, right? It's always she. And I thought that was interesting because, one, I wonder if that's how King was inspired to write Christine, was just noticing this, and then maybe it led him to this whole story. But yeah, if you really think about that too, like a person owns a car, they have an ownership over that. And so the fact that they are referring to it as a she seems a little sexist. But then also the sexual aspect too, right? And how men can just have this weird obsession with their cars or their boats or whatever, these things. And so again, that sexual aspect is something that is there in both book and movie, but I feel like the movie focuses on it maybe even more than the book had. So when it comes to book versus movie, so I did like this book quite a lot. For one, the way it was written, how it starts out in first person, being written from Dennis's perspective, and then we end that way as well. But the middle part is like third person, but I thought that was pretty unique, and I liked that method of writing. However, I did feel like at times this book kind of went on longer than it needed to, and it probably could have been about 50 pages shorter. And it also wasn't one that I was scared by. And the parts when Christine is chasing down people, and then even the showdown, I wasn't too invested in it. I don't know if it's because I'm just not into cars, but yeah, something about those scenes, I wasn't as like on the edge of my seat as I probably should have been. Although I was definitely invested and tense and on edge when it got to things involving Arnie and him being possessed by Lebay, in those moments when it seems like Arnie is at the surface or near the surface. And like, it's so close to him just confessing everything and getting rid of Christine and just being over with it, right? But then he doesn't though, and he's just sucked back in. And yeah, those parts when you're just like, oh man, like Arnie, come on. And how there's like the real Arnie is in there somewhere. And yeah, so those parts I did love, like those human aspects and the possession aspects I did like a lot. But yeah, the stuff with Christine specifically, I just, again, it was fine, but I didn't love it. I did think that the movie improved on those parts though, because, you know, the visuals were just really cool. And that part when Christine is on fire driving, like that is iconic for a reason because it just looks so cool. And then I like how Lebay is the one possessing Arnie and Christine in the book. But then I also like how the movie takes the stance of like, she's just evil and that's it. Like, we don't need to know why. She's just been like this ever since she was made. And the audience just accepts that. And we continue on with the movie, right? There's no explanation given. And so I do kind of like that as well. In some ways, I want to say the stuff with Lebay I prefer with the book. But again, there's something I like about the movie too, just being like, this is the way it is, and we're not going to explain it. And yeah, when it comes to which one wins, this is tough, but I think I'm going to say that the book wins by just a bit. I would probably give the book 3.5 stars, whereas the movie, I think I would give 3 stars. I did read other people on Letterboxd say how this is a movie that gets better each time you watch it. So maybe I just need to watch it a few more times and then I'll give it a higher rating. But for now, yeah, like both book and movie I enjoyed, but neither one is my new favorite Stephen King. But yeah, I enjoyed them both, but ultimately the book wins by just a bit. And a couple of years ago, there was talk of this being readapted, but it was like in 2022, I think. And so since then, we've heard nothing, so I don't know if that's happening or not. If they did readapt it, though, I would be curious if they stayed closer to the book and kept the Lebay possession aspect. And also, there's parts where, like, Lebay's corpse ghost will be seen in the car, and so some of those scenes were pretty creepy. And then also, the people who the car killed, like, their ghosts would appear in the car, you know? And so, yeah, visually, like, I think that would have creeped me out even more in the movie than just seeing Christine driving around, you know? And then also, you know, that scene I talked about where Arnie is talking about love. That's when he and Dennis are in the car driving, and Dennis is like very nervous and on edge, being like, whoa, like Arnie is crazy. And we got a scene like that in the book, but it was a little different because in the book, it was like this super trippy scene where it was like a 10-minute car ride, and yet it felt like it went on for hours. And he was like seeing all of these crazy things, meaning Dennis, and, you know, seeing the ghosts of people who Christine had killed were there. And all the while, Arnie is just talking in kind of a normal way, but he's also talking a lot like Lebay. And so it's just this super trippy car ride in the book. But yeah, so both car ride scenes in both book and movie were tense and uncomfortable, but kind of for different reasons. But yeah, that wraps it up for Christine. Thank you to those who voted in that poll, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.